Hello, it's me, and now I'm on here. And it looks like Sherry and at least one other person are as well. Um, and so I still have this little lag of about 10 seconds, but that's okay. I can deal with that. The secret is to turn off the volume on my actual computer so I can hear myself through my headphones, but I don't get the same thing coming back to me 8 seconds later, as if I'm remembering my own previous thoughts and statements much too loudly. Uh, so let's see. I would say good news. We did hit our goal. We got 1,000 supporters. It took a little bit of moving around on exactly where those were coming from, but I considered a few different sources that came in during the drive, and so that's been great. So it looks like, yes, this goes on my arm. I've been contacted by someone in Portland who's a fan of the show, and I'm supposed to go out to Seattle this summer to see my mom, so I might get it done when I'm out there. Just do a little quick through 2.5, 3 hour drive down from Seattle to Portland. It's not that bad. Um, so thank you all for that. Anybody who is involved with that, or even anybody who's put up with it. My this whole time where I've been badgering people for a couple weeks, not begging, but certainly badgering, certainly bringing it up a lot. The whole financial model that we need to survive, and we shall survive, and we shall thrive, in fact. So let's wanted to talk a little bit about this week's show, and I've gotten actually a lot of. Yes, Margaret says we should all get matching tattoos. Yeah, just a membership, like a financial support for the show is enough, I think, for now. But yeah, at some point and then let's move to a big compound and all live together. That's going to be awesome. So this topic kind of came around when I was thinking about the therapy that I've been going to for the last year plus, and how the therapist who I've been seeing for a few years now just has been a different entity in my life, and how I associate it with sitting in a room in my house, or sometimes sitting in my car, and talking to her through there. And I sort of wondered what that was doing in terms of the dissonance. So if you listen to this episode of the show, when I talked to Dr. Sasong, I keep bringing up this, yeah, but things just feel sort of different. Because I'd also heard from Ken Duckworth, and I bring this up in the show too, that a lot of therapists are giving up their office space. They're giving up their room full of ferns and comfy chairs and unfinished wood bookshelves. They're giving up their large pillows and their tiny rugs. And they're just doing everything by distance. I couldn't do that. I want to go back. I want to have a human encounter. But so I was wondering about that. And then that got me wondering about apps like Talkspace. And long ago, I used to host a tech show, a technology show for Marketplace. I think it's still running, Marketplace Tech. I was the first host of that, and we used to always talk to Chet Wisniewski, and I've kept in touch with him, and he knows a lot about security. And I actually found that over the course of the show, of putting the show together, a lot of my alarm got kind of put at ease by other factors that I hadn't really considered. Because I thought, this has got to be bad if we're just going two-dimensional all the way across. This can't be good. But Dr. Sasong pointed out, yeah, but think about the underserved communities. Think about places like Alaska or Texas that don't have nearly as many mental health providers as there are people in need. And especially when there's going to be so much more need with the trauma of dealing with the past 14, 15 months of COVID. And so that kind of got my attention. Like, there is going to be much more need. So the problem of a lack of psychiatrists, especially, is going to be worse. But they're going to be able to get to more people. And I know that when it's regular in-person visits with therapists, not psychiatrists, but therapists, the show-up rate is between 60 and 80%. So there's a big chunk that just don't show up. Often those providers can't get that money back, and so that's lost revenue. And now with telehealth, telepsychiatry, teletherapy, it's close to 100%. Like pretty much everybody makes it to their appointment. So that's been huge for them. And there are not as many liabilities in terms of the security of these platforms. There's danger in the stability of the platforms, because they're hinky. Like I've had some meetings go really well, and I've had some where the audio just drops out mysteriously. Maybe there's too many people using the Wi-Fi or something, but it just blinks out. So that's been a liability. But generally, hackers aren't going to be too interested in exactly what you're doing in your therapy session, because they can't harvest the data in the way that they could over, like, hacking into your Amazon.com account and getting passwords that you're likely to use on other accounts as well, or banking information, social security numbers. So it's actually kind of better in that regard. The one thing that I did try to draw attention to on this episode was what Talkspace is doing, and Chet Wisniewski talked about that, where they have robots rowboats, as my mother would say. They have rowboats listening to your conversation, depersonalizing it, like stripping off the individual identity from it, and then doing like auto listening for keywords, and then using that to market their services. So like if the word stress comes up a lot in your conversation with your therapist, and a lot of other people's conversations with their therapists, and Talkspace is like a conduit linking you to therapist, then the robot will say, oh, okay, stress, that's a big issue right now. And so then you'll see the internet ads, the banner ads, or just the copy on the main website of Talkspace saying, find solutions to stress. So, it isn't somebody with personal feelings listening to it. It's not Michael Phelps, spokesperson for Talkspace, sitting in a room or a swimming pool listening to you. But it is something. And I wouldn't think that it would freak me out, because it's what Gmail does. And it's the whole thing Gmail is founded on. I've been using Gmail since before anybody I know. I got like an advanced invitation. And I remember like thinking about that bargain, like, okay, they're going to serve me ads throughout the Googleverse based on what I say in here. So if I am talking on my Gmail, if I'm sending something to somebody and saying, hey, we should look into renting some kayaks, they're going to serve me up kayak ads. And, but that's a bargain for easy to access web-based email. So you make that bargain. It feels different for me with therapy and talking out loud. And so that's been, I think that's a little odd. Maybe it shouldn't. And maybe to younger people, it doesn't. Anytime I talk to people in their early 20s who were raised on the internet, like I was not, they have a different view on what's acceptable use of your product and your presence and your privacy on the internet. It is a world. I mean, the main thing I wanted to do with this episode is say, look, this is the world that we're going to be in, and we can talk about what's good or bad, but it's worth thinking about. In fact, next week we're talking with Jarrett Hill from the podcast Fanti, which is a Maximum Fun podcast, and we get into a lot of the issue of a therapist who is of your worlds. So Jarrett is Black and queer, and when he sees a a white, straight therapist, it's not quite the same experience for him. He doesn't think he'd get as much out of it. Because he'd have to explain these worlds, and the therapist wouldn't have an innate understanding of them. And I wonder if there might be a closer relationship, or a closer way to serve a relationship between therapist and patient. If you know that you could just do it all online, like if you're, I think I say in the closing of next week's episode, if you are Black and queer and in Lubbock, and the only Black queer therapist available in the state of Texas is in Austin, it could still work. And that's something that might not have worked out pre-COVID. And so we're not glad about COVID, but it's something. So this is a discussion that's hopped over onto the Preshies page on Facebook, and people are talking about that relationship. Mark says, I still very much prefer face-to-face and jumped back after being vaccinated, though my schedule very much allows that to not be such a burden. I know I want to get back into a therapist's office, but the main issue that they're trying to figure out is how to verify someone's vaccinated in a way that they are allowed to legally find out. And then the ventilation in those offices, they got to figure that out as well. Anna says, the ability to book a video appointment with my old therapist that I see very occasionally, 2 to 3 times a year, made it so much easier. I'll keep doing it in the future. Knocking the commute time off saves me at least 30 minutes. It's nice to be in person, but with someone I had a pre-existing relationship with, online is great. That's interesting. So some people are saying, well, I have met this person in person, and so I can transition over to the other side. Abigail on Facebook says, having to sit in my car with an electric lantern and worry if my Wi-Fi was going to drop made teletherapy less than ideal for me. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and with psychiatry, it mostly works, but it sometimes doesn't work if things are hinky. And with psychiatry, as Dr. Sasong said, if like they need to check side effects from a medication that you're on, then you might need to show up in person. But it's a mostly 2-dimensional world we're heading into, just like with live sports and live theater, just a little less so. Maybe we'll have to get dressed up to go to the therapist, as in the opera. Margaret says, I actually had already been doing telehealth calls with my psychiatrist before the pandemic. He'd be able to see me during later hours after I finished work. Yeah, it's interesting. I know when I interviewed Andy Richter, he talked about having a great therapist in New York, and then he moved to LA, and they just kept going over the phone. And I wonder how that licensing works for something like that. And I imagine he just paid in cash rather than insurance. But yeah, I mean, hopefully the technical parts, the kludgier parts of licensing and high-speed internet access and insurance coverage can get worked out. Hopefully insurance will run smoothly, he said, idealistically. And this could just be a really good option. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, like, if everybody is presented with an option. If you ask, 1,000 people, online therapy or in-person therapy, like, what would be the percentage breakdown of that? I wonder what it would be. I don't know. It depends, somebody would say. So anyway, that was the show for this week, and I think I've already previewed the show for next week. We've got some great shows coming up. We're going to do, we're talking to Allison Raskin from YouTube fame, and we got an episode explaining what bipolar is and isn't. That's one that I'm really enjoying, because I think that's a term that's been used very loosely for a very long time by a lot of people. And that's part of our mission is to kind of debunk and rebunk if things need bunking. So yeah, that's all coming up. Again, thank you We all thank you for your support during the Max Fund Drive. We don't have to talk about that stuff again till next May. But you've demonstrated that the show is strong, and so here comes the fellas, I guess, is what we're all looking towards. And me from 7 Seconds agrees. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody, and stay tuned. Join the Preshies group on Facebook if you haven't. There's great discussion going on over there. I step by sometimes, but not all the time. All right. Oh, Margaret, thank you so much for joining Max Fun. It is the max amount of fun you can have, especially when you're talking about chronic, debilitating mental illnesses. All right. Bye.